due to skillful methods such as penetrating the vital points of the subtle Vajra body. This is dependent upon having received the 4 pure empowerments, having properly guarded the commitments and vows, and having familiarized oneself with the generation stage. So let's see if we can make some sense of what's being said there. So firstly, we see this term, the clear light mind. So we can talk about 3 levels of mind. We can talk about coarse, subtle, and very subtle. And here, when it says clear light mind, it's talking about the very subtle mind. The coarse mind is the mind that is active now, the one we have active now. Thoughts, memories, emotions. That's what's active. In the Theravada and Mahayana, we are trying to refine this coarse mind. We're trying to make it more subtle through the shamatha practice, concentration practice. Because in the concentration practice, we are cultivating a relaxed, stable, clear mind. So we're trying to make the mind more calm, more clear, more focused. So we are training this coarse mind, making it a little bit more subtle, more calm, more clear, more focused. And then we're using this more subtle level of mind in our Vipassana practice to penetrate the nature of reality. In Theravada to realize no self, in Mahayana to realize emptiness, and then we move along the path to either the goal of nirvana or enlightenment. So both in Theravada and Mahayana, we're using this coarse mind and moving it down a little bit into the more subtle level. But there's a deeper level of mind called the very subtle mind, here called the mind of clear light. In the Nyingma Dzogchen tradition, this is called Rigpa. In the Kagyu Mahamudra tradition, this is often called primordial mind. Ordinary mind, sometimes they use, there's a couple of different names given to it. So it's given many different names. This very subtle level of mind, of course, we have, but it's very difficult to gain access to that very deep level of mind. In fact, in the Theravada Mahayana practices, there are no practices that enable us to gain access to this very subtle mind. But here in Tantra Vajrayana, there are practices to help us to gain access to this very subtle mind. And we'll have a look at those in a minute. With every level of mind, we also have the physical support for that. So the coarse mind, the mind that's active now, is supported on this coarse body, this body. The subtle mind is supported on subtle body. Subtle body, we're going to see shortly, are these subtle energies flowing in what's called channels. And then the very subtle mind is associated with a very subtle body, a very subtle wind energy. And we'll talk a little bit more about those here in the text now. So the text says that Tantra Mahamudra refers to the clear light mind, so the very subtle mind, that is the primordial wisdom of co-emergent great bliss. So here we see the term great bliss, in that the mind, once we gain access to more subtle levels of mind, one of the qualities is a lot of bliss or joy in the mind. So this term great bliss is usually referring to this very subtle mind. So when you see the mind of great bliss, also it's referring to this very subtle mind. And it says here, co-emergent. Co-emergent means two things arising together. And here this word co-emergent can refer to a number of different things. And in the Gelug tradition, when we use the word co-emergent, often we're talking about the mind and the emptiness of the mind are co-emergent. They're arising together, or they exist together. Whereas often in the Kagyu Mahamudra tradition, often when we use the word co-emergent, we're talking often about mind and appearances, that the appearances and the mind are co-emerging, that they are existing simultaneously, the appearances and the mind to which the appearances arise. And it says here that this mind arises, meaning it manifests, through the entering, abiding and dissolving of the winds into the central channel due to skillful methods such as penetrating the vital points of the subtle Vajra body. So subtle Vajra body is the subtle body that is connected to the subtle mind. And so the subtle body are these channels. There's one channel down the centre of the body called the central channel. There are two side channels, and then from those there are a number of channels going through the body. Of course, these channels are not something you can see or even with any instruments of modern science. They're very subtle. And in these channels we have subtle energies running or moving. In Sanskrit, prana, chi, in Tibetan, lung. And here it talks about, and then also in this subtle body, at various points along the central channel, we have what's called chakras, which are constrictions on the central channel, knots in the central channel. And what we want to do to cause this very subtle mind to become manifest or active, we have to basically open the heart chakra. And to do that, we have to, as the text says here, we have to get all the winds to enter. So we want all the subtle energies to enter into the central channel, to abide and dissolve in the central channel. So we want all the subtle energies to come into the central channel, to move to the heart chakra, to dissolve there, and that will cause the heart chakra to open, and then the very subtle mind will become manifest. And it says we do that through the skillful methods such as penetrating the vital points of the subtle Vajra body. So the vital points are often referred to these chakras at various points of the body. And with this subtle body and mind, often the analogy given is that the subtle energies are like a horse. The subtle mind is like the rider on the horse. So where the horse goes, the rider goes. And so therefore, to penetrate the vital points of the subtle Vajra body often means placing your attention, particularly at the top entrance of the central channel, or the bottom entrance, focusing your attention there. And by focusing your attention there, then of course the mind, the subtle energies go there, because wherever the mind and the rider are the same. So you put your attention there, all the subtle energies move there. So then you're causing the subtle energies to enter, abide and dissolve in the central channel. Now, this we see, if we continue on and then more comments, it says here, this is dependent upon having received the 4 pure empowerments, having properly guarded the commitments and vows, and having familiarized oneself with the generation stage. So remember, the door of entry into Tantra Vajrayana is to receive an empowerment. And here he talks about 4 empowerments. And these 4 empowerments are to empower us to do the various aspects of tantric practice. And in Tantra practice, we saw that in the chart here, there are 2 stages. There is what's called generation stage and completion stage. And so it says here, in order to be able to dissolve all the winds into the central channel and cause the very subtle mind to become manifest, it says it's dependent on having received the 4 pure empowerments, having properly guarded the commitments and vows, and having familiarized oneself with the generation stage. So this process of getting the winds to enter, abide and dissolve, this is completion stage practice. So in completion stage practice, we are manipulating subtle energies in the body to do this, to cause the very subtle mind to become manifest. But to be able to do this, we need to engage in generation stage practice. And in order to do that, of course, we need to receive empowerment. And the empowerment empowers us to do a particular tantric practice, to usually practice a particular what's called deity. And these 4 empowerments, the first empowerment empowers us to engage in generation stage, and the other 3 are to do with these completion stage practices. And it says here to engage in this, we need to properly guard the commitments and vows. Contrary to popular belief, as the text here says, we need to properly guard commitments and vows, meaning that just like in Theravada and Mahayana, the basis is ethics, so in Tantra Vajrayana. In fact, in each level that we go, from Theravada to Mahayana to Vajrayana, the level of ethics that we are trying to keep is more and more difficult. For example, in Tantra or Vajrayana, if we give up love for even one single sentient being, just one, that's considered a serious ethical downfall in Tantra or Vajrayana practice. That's the level of ethics we are to maintain for Tantra. So not easy.
Can you explain it? What did you say?
If you give up love, if you give up love for even one single sentient being, if you say, "Oh, I don't care about that person, I don't like that person, I hope they suffer," that is serious ethical downfall in Tantra. Serious. Like if you have that sort of mind, you don't have a very good basis for tantric practice. Whereas, of course, that's not a good thing, but in Theravada Mahayana, that wouldn't be considered serious ethical downfall. Yes, it's of course not good, but so the level of ethics as we go in each level, from Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, more difficult to follow. So here in the generation stage practice, generally we are doing what's called a sadhana, practice manual, a sadhana. And generally in this practice, we're following certain instructions, and it often involves a lot of visualization. And this is one of the differences between Theravada and Mahayana on one hand and Vajrayana on the other hand. Theravada and Mahayana are both called causal vehicles, whereas Tantra Vajrayana is called a resultant vehicle. And it's to do with perspective. In Theravada Mahayana, our perspective of the spiritual path is, here we are here, There's the goal of nirvana. There's the goal of enlightenment. These are the practices we need to engage in to create the causes to achieve that goal. So we're looking forward on the spiritual path in both Theravada and Mahayana. Whereas in Tantra Vajrayana, we have the complete opposite perspective. We are looking at the spiritual path from the perspective of the result. And we're doing all the practices from the perspective of the enlightened state. And this is an approach sometimes we see people using in sport. That, you know, I saw the Winter Olympics recently in some of the downhill skiing there, the slalom and that. I saw these people up the top sort of, you know, going through their routine a number of times. And then when they did it, that helps them to achieve the result because they're doing it from the perspective of already having done the job. So here, so in the generation stage, we're doing the entire practice from the enlightened state. And one of the first things that we see in the sadhana here, the practice manual, it says to arise as the deity. And the deity is simply enlightened form, particular form. Tara, Chenrezig, Manjushri, many different forms. And of course, to be able to do this, we need a good basis. As we briefly mentioned earlier, to engage in this practice, this is based on Mahayana and Theravada. So the entry into Theravada was renunciation, the entry into Mahayana was bodhicitta, and then of course within Mahayana we have this wisdom of emptiness. So if we want to practice generation stage practice, we need these three things. We need renunciation, we need bodhicitta, we need the wisdom of emptiness as the basis, foundation. Because otherwise what happens here is we have our practice manual and it says, arise as the deity. And then we go, okay, now I'm pretending to be Tara. Now I'm pretending to be Chenrezig. We've completely missed the point of the whole practice. That's not what we're doing. Because all we're doing then is instead of grasping onto this is me, now we're grasping onto Tara or Chenrezig as me. We're not doing the practice. Because we're arising out of emptiness. This is what the text says. Arise out of emptiness as the deity. But if we don't know what emptiness is, all we're going to do is instead of grasping onto this as me, we're going to grasp onto Tara, Chenrezig or whoever as me. Then we're just more delusion. More delusion. So if we really want to practice this properly, we need to go through the steps. We need to go through the preliminaries, the sutra level, then we're ready for the tantra level. So if we jump straight into tantra, when we don't have the necessary basis, and I think basically we're just going to be wasting our time. So that's why it says here, in the text in fact, that to practice this completion stage, we need to first, having properly guarded commitments of vows and having familiarized oneself with generation stage. And then also to practice this generation stage, of course, then we need to go back one. We need to familiarise ourselves with the sutra level of practice. So we need to familiarise ourselves with the vipassana practice of emptiness, which is on the basis of the shamatha practice, and that's on the basis of these preliminaries. So we need to do step by step. Otherwise, we're sort of going ahead of ourselves. Any questions so far?
Can you please elaborate about the connection between the deity practice and Mahamudra?
Yes, that's still coming. It's coming up in the text shortly.
So basically, if you practice the tantra, so you need to get to the point of direct realization of emptiness, and then.
Well, that'd be the best, but but at least some experience of it.
Okay, and then instead of going through the regular Mahayana grounds, you go through a different path, which is the tantra.
Yeah, because in tantra we're gaining access to this, and if we can gain access to this and use this to realize emptiness, we can accelerate, because this is a more powerful level of mind than this one. So we're still realising the same emptiness, but instead of with this, we're using this. So we can accelerate. And then what the path looks like is a little bit different as well, yeah. Okay. So then it says here, it is the Mahamudra accepted by Saraha, Nagarjuna, Naropa and Maitripa. It is the innermost essence of the Anuttara Yoga class of Tantra, and it is the principal subject matter taught in the 7 accomplishments text and Saraha's 3 cycles of dohas. These dohas are like spiritual songs. So here, then we have this Anuttara Yoga class of Tantra. So we can talk about 4 classes or 4 levels of Tantra. And they're called Kriya Tantra, Charya Tantra, Yoga Tantra, and Highest Yoga Tantra. And this is levels of tantric practice. And we can talk about outer yoga and inner yoga. Outer yoga is more outer behaviors, and inner yoga is more internal meditative. So Kriya Tantra puts more emphasis, a lot of emphasis on external practices because it's easier. So here we have a lot of things about cleanliness, certain behaviour, eating the right types of food and so forth. And this is where in Tibetan Buddhism you have this idea of the black foods that you are to avoid, you know, garlic and onion and so forth, could agitate the mind. So that comes here. Then in Charya Tantra, now there's sort of an equal emphasis on outer practices and inner practices. Yoga Tantra, then much more emphasis on inner yoga, much less on outer. And Highest Yoga is really all about inner yoga practice. So here, when we talk about the 2 stages, generation stage, completion stage, it's referring to this level of practice. There are 4 levels, but generally in the Tibetan Buddhist system, you don't really see too many practices at these levels. More you get this and this level, more common. Okay. And then it goes on to say here, as for generating the realization of this Mahamudra, if the winds enter, abide and dissolve in the central channel through having trained in the preceding paths in previous lives, preceding paths meaning generation stage and then shamatha, vipassana, preliminaries and so forth, or in the earlier part of this life, then such a person can actualize the clear light Mahamudra by observing any suitable object, like settling the mind in a non-conceptual state. Previous Kagyu masters gave this person the name the simultaneous one. So simultaneous one is someone who can really actualize this clear light mind simply by resting in a sort of non-conceptual state. But of course the fine print is that's because they've done a lot of work already in this life and previous lives, as said here. And he says, for all other trainees, it is definitely necessary to meditate on Tumo and so forth. So Tumo is one of these completion stage practices. To actualize the Mahamudra of this path. Accordingly, with respect to meditating on the Mahamudra indicated here, it is necessary to obtain the 4 pure empowerments and to train in the generation stage, the completion stage, and common paths and so forth. So what he's saying is that for the normal person, we need to go through the preliminaries, the common paths of shamatha and vipassana, then we need to engage in generation stage practice, then completion stage practice, and then we can cause this very subtle mind to become active. It says here, such a person is given the name the serial one. Thus, even most of the great adepts of this path entered into the lineage of empowerment of the various classes of Anuttara Yoga Tantras. So he's saying that even the most great masters in Tibet followed the same strategy. They first engaged in the preliminaries, the common paths, and shamatha vipassana practice, then received empowerment, engaged in the generation stage practice, then went to the completion stage practice, then actualized this very subtle mind. Here so we can talk about these two levels of Sutra and Tantra Mahamudra, but often in the Kagyu tradition, they add a third level. So we often see 3 levels. First, we have the Sutra Mahamudra, which of course is the main topic for this week, in this text. And in Sutra Mahamudra, the 2 main practices are shamatha and vipassana. So here, of course, in Sutra Mahamudra, we are, through the shamatha practice, we're gaining access to a more subtle level of our mind, and then we're using that in our vipassana practice to realise emptiness, particularly the emptiness of our own mind, and then slowly we can move along the path to enlightenment. The next level of practice, of course, is Tantra Mahamudra. So in Tantra Mahamudra then, we are in the generation stage practice, we are again usually arising as a deity, doing certain visualizations, often together with some mantra recitation. But at a deeper level, generation stage practice is very much a shamatha practice. It's really to develop a high level of focus. Because then, in completion stage practice, we are, again, as the text suggests, penetrating the vital points of the subtle Vajra body. We are focusing and causing all the subtle energies to enter into the central channel, abide and dissolve at the heart chakra. So we're doing very subtle body work, manipulating subtle energies in the completion stage practice to cause this very subtle mind to become manifest then, and using that for our vipassana emptiness practice. But sometimes in Kagyu tradition they add one more level called Essence Mahamudra. And that also usually has 2 practices. And to describe those practices a little bit more, I'd like to read from a book called Pointing Out the Great Way by Daniel P. Brown, and it's a book about Kagyu Mahamudra practice. And on page 6 or 8 he says the following. In Buddhism, a popular distinction is made between the Sutra and Tantra methods for spiritual development. The Sutra methods generally are drawn from the practices of early Buddhism and are typically threefold. Preliminary practices to make the body and mind fit for formal meditation. Second, concentration training to stabilize the mind, shamatha. And third, special insight practice to realize the mind's essential nature. So special insight is vipassana. Vipassana is usually translated as insight. The word vipassana is the Sanskrit. The Pali word is vipassana. The VI prefix means higher, superior. Pasana or pasana means to see. So vipassana or vipassana is higher seeing, seeing beyond, usually translated as insight.